In this household, we love RNGesus. If only he loved us back. Okay, actually, we kinda really hate him sometimes. Well, anyway, welcome to Astral Throne, a roguelike strategy RPG that is exactly what my cravings for a game combining these two genres have been looking for. So hop on the RNG train, ready yourself for a bumpy ride, and get cozy as I walk you through the details of the journey to show you how great the trip is, no matter how bumpy it may be. Look out the window and witness the astral beauty. That was a weird-ass metaphorical kind of intro. I'm keeping it, I don't care. So as always, I'm gonna be starting with the story, and yes, I am spoiling it, so if you want to go in blind, here's your chance to leave the video, though honestly there doesn't seem to be that much of a story to go around, you'll see why. The story takes place on the continent of Astral, which is currently being ravaged by the Starblind, a cult comprised of two groups of people, one who've lost their free will, and others who remain sane and act as leaders, attempting to kill anyone who tries to interfere with the plan of their master, Astral, the god who exists in the star of Montes Luna. Yeah, in this world, stars house gods, and basically the star of Montes Luna fell out of the sky, afflicting many with star blindness, which is the cause of those people losing their minds, and why they're trying to protect the star. So it's your job to make your way to Montes Luna and destroy the fallen star to be rid of the star blindness and bring peace back to the land. Manage that, and you'll earn yourself an ending. And yeah, that's really about it for the general gist of the story. Obviously there's a lot more to it than that, but to explain why I'm not going into that much detail, I think it'll be best to just explain to you how the story is told in-game. So, upon starting a run, you'll have to choose two hero characters, a primary and secondary one. The primary is your leader and the main character around whom the story revolves, while the second has a more supporting role. Naturally, every hero has their own motivations and reasons for taking up arms against the Starblind, but that also means that the details of world building and lore you'll uncover will depend on the combination of hero you've selected. And since I haven't tried every hero in the game, that means I'm not in any position to give you all of the details of the story. But to give an example of the kind of story you can expect in a regular run, Lyra is next in line to the throne of Imperial Cadence, and she's trying to return there to find her father so they can put an end to the Starblind madness together. The first major boss of a run, Sagittaire, is, or rather was, the warden of the Imperial Capital Prison, who weirdly has taken to fighting on the side of the Starblind, forcing you to fight her. After defeating her, if you've chosen Vega as your secondary character, he and Lyra will have a conversation where she'll explain that the Cadenians revere and are encouraged to learn about the stars. She'll also explain that Montes Luna serves as the specified space for those most dedicated and devoted to learning about the stars, who are called the High Firmament and are now high-ranking Starblind members. So Lyra wants to find her father since he's been spending a lot of time with the High Firmament lately and she's convinced that he wouldn't have let this happen. Well, as it turns out, the second major boss of a run, Ares, is in fact Lyra's father and the one responsible for, albeit accidentally, killing the god in the star of Montes Luna, resulting in the current situation, forcing you to kill him and the god, Astral, to put an end to it all. Pull that off, and you'll get one of many endings. Yes, every hero in the game has multiple endings, though admittedly I'm not entirely sure what dictates the ending you get. Occasionally, you'll see messages like Lyra's resolve deepens or Lyra's convictions waver and others like it, and I think these show you how the hero's personality changes over the course of the run. And I think your final personality is what determines the ending you get. Again, I think this is how it works. The game doesn't really explain it to you, and out of the 3 runs I won, 2 of them were with Lyra, and I got the same ending on both runs, so I'm pretty hard-pressed to tell what's actually going on. Well, anyway, the story is perfectly fine. It's got an interesting premise, and I think the writing is pretty good, but obviously I'm missing too many details to make big conclusions about it. Perhaps I should have done more runs, but then this video would have taken forever to come out. Still, the stories I got were pretty good, they're just very condensed, which makes them fairly simple, but I don't think that detracts from their quality in the slightest. That said, I did find the writing to be quite good. It's humorous and witty and sometimes nonsensical, like all of the loading screen tips being silly quips about drinking water or using blackout curtains to sleep better and other such shenanigans. I also like how the player phase explanation chastises you and tells you to go back to giving orders, or how certain characters' bios are like, yeah, there's a literal apocalypse underway, but this guy's more worried about his midterm results. Though the writing does know how to be serious as well during darker moments, and every hero has their own distinct personalities, resulting in different interactions when paired with different people, which leads to some pretty interesting conversations. So long as you don't want massive, complex, and detailed epics, I think you'll find the story and writing to be pretty good, and well worth the read. In terms of graphics, I think the game looks pretty nice. I quite enjoy the nighttime atmosphere most outdoor maps have, and it helps make the ending, where the stardust dissipates and reveals a bright blue sky, feel impactful. The magical fantasy astral themed setting also results in unique set pieces, like the second major boss map that seems to take place in the cosmos, with your units walking on what looks like stars. It's honestly pretty cool. The 3D models the units use are pretty nice, and I think they're well animated as well, but unfortunately there aren't that many animations to go around as far as I could tell. I mean, there's a pretty good amount of variety, and it's not like I was expecting a AAA amount of it or anything, but just as an example, there are no unique animations for crits or follow-up attacks. It's just the same animation, except there's a little admittedly neat flash if it's a critical. It's definitely not a big deal, and maybe I just feel this way because I'm too used to modern Fire Emblem games with bigger budgets, which this game does have plenty of similarities with, to be fair, even if it feels incredibly inappropriate to compare them in this respect, but it feels like you'll pretty quickly have seen the majority of animations available. Sometimes you'll also get some slightly weird and janky animations, like your character's sleeves stretching in unnatural ways, or your character might decide that using this skill is a particularly opportune time for a sick flip. Just to show off, I guess. And also, sometimes the combat animations will just straight up bug out, and the camera will get stuck in an awkward spot, preventing the animations from playing correctly, which, admittedly, does result in some occasionally funny moments. Oh damn, what a blow, did you see that? Sound-wise, I think it does pretty well here too. I think all the sound effects are appropriate and satisfying to boot. The sound effect when defeating an enemy sounds extra powerful, and the sharp sound when landing a critical helps to convey its flashy, more grandiose nature when compared to a normal attack. The music is also pretty good, though I didn't feel like there were that many different tracks. All of them sounded good to me, especially the siege battles, which have their own more intense battle themes. And a nice little touch I quite liked, during those siege battles the music will evolve and change over the course of the battle, starting out calm and subdued during your preparations. Gaining intensity once the fighting starts, and finally becoming even more intense and hectic as you close in on or reach the boss. It's a small thing, but it helps to make these fights more dynamic and helps bring a sense of progress and climax to the game's most important battles, which I feel is neat. Alright, so, the gameplay now. Since this is a roguelike strategy RPG, there's quite a lot to go over, so I think I'll start from the top of a new run and explain things in order as they become relevant, or when I think it makes sense to cover them, and hopefully that will be good enough to not be a total mess. The first thing you'll have to do when starting a run is choosing both of your heroes. Every hero starts with a memory, a permanent buff that applies to your entire team, a starting skill, their own unique items, and 2 specific militia units. These only applies to your primary hero, however. Your secondary one only has their unique items and also have lower starting stats. Afterwards, you can select your difficulty down here, unlocking new ones if you're able to beat the current highest one. Once you've decided all of that, you'll begin the run in Act 1 on the world map, where you'll be forced to participate in your first battle. When the battle starts, you'll find yourself in the preparation phase, where you can outfit your units as you please and change their starting position before the fighting truly begins. Being a strategy RPG, you'll have to move your units on a grid-based map, leveraging your positioning, items, stats, and more to gain the strategic advantage and fulfill the win condition with the least amount of casualties possible. Preferably, anyway. So you'll have to start by selecting a unit and then moving them to your intended position, at which point you'll have several options available. You can go into your inventory to equip a more appropriate weapon or use items like health potions to heal. You can trade to exchange items between 2 adjacent characters, which is a completely free action, by the way. You can also check your unit's stats, use context-specific actions like opening doors and chests, use skills, which I'll touch on a little later, or simply wait to end that unit's turn. Naturally, and perhaps most importantly, you'll also be able to fight any enemy in range. Doing so will require you to choose the weapon you want to fight with, which obviously is going to have a big impact. Weapons in this game can provide a lot of different stat modifiers, from increases or decreases to hit rate, crit rate, avoid, or even some of the core stats like defense and resistance, on top of potentially having a weapon skill and providing various bonuses to your damage output. Once your weapon is chosen, you will see the battle forecast, which will show you the result of combat, assuming all attacks hit. Whether they do or not is up to luck, of course, as are critical hits which deal an extra 50% damage at base, though this can be modified with skills and other such things. After combat, you'll earn experience, which is a good segue into talking about how the stats and level ups work, since they are a little unusual. So every unit has 7 main stats: HP, which determines how much damage they can take before becoming a corpse; Strength and Magic determines how much damage you deal with physical and magical attacks respectively; Defense and Resistance govern how much damage you take from physical and magical attacks; Dexterity improves your hit rate and is needed to use weapon skills; and finally, Speed increases your avoid and your attack speed, which allows you to gain an extra attack in battle if yours is higher than the opponent's by 4. When you gain experience, it's not your unit who earns it, but rather their stats, and when a stat acquires enough experience, it increases by 1. Every stat of every character has a growth rate, determining how much XP that stat has to gain before increasing. The higher the growth, the less XP it needs. When a stat increases, you gain one of these bubbles, I guess, and once you've earned 7 of them, your character will level up, gaining a max HP boost and getting to learn one of 3 randomly chosen skills. Skills can be pretty much anything really, from always active passives to manually selected special attacks, healing, buffs, beneficial or detrimental status afflictions, etc. In total, there are 3 types of skills: simple skills, weapon skills, and I guess complex skills is what I'll call them. Your units can have an unlimited amount of simple skills, but a unit can only have as many complex skills as they have skill slots, the number of which can be increased with a special item. Weapon skills, on the other hand, are tied to specific weapons which can only be used with or if that weapon is being used, but only if your unit meets the dex requirement. There are 8 types of weapons in total, 4 physical and 4 magical. 3 of the magical and physical weapon types have a weapon triangle advantage system where having the advantageous weapon type grants +1 damage and +10 hit, with the same numbers being incurred as a penalty if you are at a disadvantage. The remaining 2 types, ranged weapons and ritual magic, are always effective against units with flying or any mounts respectively, so make sure you consider all of this as well. In battles, you'll also be able to find recruitable enemy units. Send one of your characters next to them and select the recruit command to turn them into stalwart warriors, benchwarmers, or blood sacrifices to curry favor with RNGesus. Once your turn is over, it'll become the unaligned green unit's turn, who will either keep out of enemy range if they're unarmed, or happily and nobly sacrifice their lives by attacking any enemy they can find, even if the only enemy available will utterly destroy them. After that, it'll be the enemy's turn, who will happily oblige the green unit's death wish and murder all of them, or attempt to kill one of your units, should that not be possible. Should they succeed in killing one of your units, their corpse will remain on the map where they died. However, if you can send another unit to an adjacent tile, you'll be able to use the save command, sending your dead unit back to the caravan. That unit won't be able to participate in this battle anymore, but at least you will be able to use them in future battles. However, if you complete a map without saving your unit, then yeah, they're gone forever. The only exception to this rule being your primary hero. If they die, well, the run is over. Every map has a designated objective that you'll need to complete in order to win the fight, and you may sometimes have some optional objectives you can fulfill for additional rewards. But you'll want to be fast. Every map has a turn limit, and if you fail to clear the map before it, the Stardust rolls in, damaging all of your units at the start of their turn and preventing all XP gain. Once you've finally completed your battle, you'll be sent to the world map, where you'll have to choose spaces to visit in order to prepare for the next battle. You can find a fair few different types of spaces. Blacksmiths, ateliers, and trainers act as shops, alchemists lets you sacrifice items for different ones, arenas let you participate in small battles for money, treasure chests give you loot, campfires heal your entire team and provide food, and question marks do whatever the hell they want. While you're walking on the map, you may come across random events to spice things up every once in a while, and they can be positive, like finding a random item on the side of the road, or negative, like one of your units suddenly deciding he wants to murder his friends. The remaining spaces are skirmishes and battles, both of which will force you into fights. However, battles usually have more complex maps or objectives and stronger enemies. After a skirmish or battle, this bar down here will have one of its segments filled, and after 4 fights the bar will be full. Once that happens, everything on the map will disappear except for the siege battle. When the bar is filled, every random event on the map will be purely negative, so it'll be in your best interest to try to get to the siege battle as quickly as possible. So you'll have to make sure you route your path on the map carefully to visit all your points of interest without engaging into too many battles and running out the clock, though you could just beeline it to the siege battle if you wanted. The siege is the final, most important, and generally hardest battle of the act. Conquer it, and you'll move on to the second act, where you'll repeat this entire process. Clear the second act, and you'll reach the third, giving you an opportunity for one last shopping trip before you have to take on the final map. Win or lose, you'll ultimately be taken back to the main menu to start another run afterwards. That about covers everything I wanted to talk about, and hopefully I explained it all at least kind of well. It's really not as complicated or overwhelming as it seems. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff, but it's all pretty straightforward and simple to learn. That said, while it may be simple, there is a lot of content here, so you'll definitely have your work cut out for you trying to learn what works well together or how to optimize your stats and all that other stuff, but there's plenty here to give you opportunities to make cool, overpowered builds and transform your ragtag bunch of misfits into a godslayer army. And well, if you've played an SRPG before, especially a Fire Emblem game, you might quickly realize that this game is pretty similar in a fair few things. That means a lot of the things that are good there are good here as well, and the one constant in Fire Emblem is that juggernauting is always the easiest way to play, and here, it's still true, and I think no one showcases this as well as Lyra. When chosen as your primary hero, she begins with so much defense that most of the physical enemies can barely scratch her, and while her resistance is bad, her starting skill allows her to gain a res boost whenever she deals magic damage, which I reckon will be pretty often since her starting item is a unique magic weapon with plus 6 power, plus 20 hit, and plus 10 crit. Right off the bat, she's a potent 1-2 ranged magic using tank who can comfortably tackle big chunks of maps with little support. So what do you do with a unit like that? Slap a horse on it. There, now you can shove her even farther into enemy lines to take even more aggro. How convenient, her unique memory immediately gives you a horse that grants plus 1 movement and plus 2 defense. The only real threat for her like this will be mages, especially the ritualistic kind, who will have advantage over her for more damage. But it won't take long for her resistance and HP stats to improve to the point where even mages won't really be able to do any substantial damage to her, especially with help from her aforementioned skill, and her ludicrous 100% defense growth will ensure no physical units will ever trouble her. And I mean, yeah, her offenses aren't good at all, mainly because of her atrocious speed preventing her from doubling basically anything, but who cares when you can just literally throw her all alone into half of the enemies on the map and watch her defeat them all without any effort. Seriously, when built correctly, she becomes practically immortal, but she's not the only hero who can pull it off. On my third successful attempt, I chose Sol Ignis as my main hero, and there was a point I honestly thought he might even be better than Lyra. 110% strength growth and 60% speed growth at base makes him an absolute offensive monster. Give him a 1-2 range weapon, and just like Lyra, you'll be able to send him right in the middle of a massive enemy group if built right. This might sound risky since his defenses aren't that good, but his fairly high speed allows him to dodge tank pretty well, and his unique memory grants him 8 stacks of the Formidable buff when killing an enemy, increasing his max HP by 8. Thing is, max HP increases also increases your unit's current HP, effectively slightly healing him whenever he kills an enemy, and considering how easy it is for him to do that, well, don't be surprised if he ever finds himself comfortably over 100 max HP. On the non-hero side, Gareth has a 100% growth in strength, which is almost as good as Soul. His speed isn't all that noteworthy, but his dexterity makes him fairly accurate, and frankly, speed isn't always that big a deal for physical offensive units for one reason: the unyielding weapon skill. Found on one weapon of every physical weapon type, for a measly 10 dexterity, this skill just gives you a free additional attack as long as you aren't at a disadvantage, which really isn't that hard to do, especially when you consider there is a status effect that literally just gives you guaranteed advantages for 2 turns, or even a skill that completely prevents you from ever being at a disadvantage. Seriously, these weapons are busted, especially considering every map in the game has a time limit, and with his excellent strength and accuracy, Gareth makes amazing use of them. Give him the flurry skill to allow him to perform all of his attacks before the enemy can perform theirs, and congratulations, you can just about pulverize any troublesome enemy for completely free. By the way, did I mention Gareth is one of the militia units that Lyra gets to start with? As if she didn't have enough of an advantage with that titanium armor. It goes without saying, but finding busted builds and synergies is part of the fun, and I think this game gives you plenty to work with in that regard. Even though I'm not really good at SRPGs, I still had a lot of fun, the battles were enjoyable, and making my characters hella strong was really cool. That said, there's a couple of things that make for slight annoyances, and I think it begins with the fairly big impact of RNG. Like I said, this is a roguelike strategy RPG, and this means this game is an excellent way of seeing if you've done anything to piss off RNGesus recently. And he can be pretty mean in this game. If one of your units has a 90% chance to hit, do not take that for granted, because it will miss sometimes, possibly more often than you might like. RNG is already kind of a deterrent for some people, and I'd wager adding another layer on top of it with roguelike elements might turn some people off, due to the importance it can have on a run, as well as the frustration that often comes with seeing your plans, strategy, or whatever else fall to ruin because of factors outside your control. And while you could argue you always have control over it, at least to some extent, it probably won't make it any less frustrating for most, especially those who aren't all that experienced. The time limits are another thing. I didn't find them to be that big a deal personally, but I can't deny they made an impact. My 2 runs where I had crazy good offense felt a lot easier and more enjoyable without having to worry about the timer. Much as I like playing offensively, and even though I understand why the timer is there, I do enjoy defensive play as well, and I feel like it too has a place in these kinds of games, especially in the beginning where your options are so limited. One of the later difficulty options even reduces the amount of turns you have, and it's no small change. On the map I was playing, my turn limit had been lowered by 3 whole turns, and my slow safe play ended up backfiring as I tried to play more aggressively, collect all the chests and loot before the time limit expired. Combined with a somewhat unlucky miss, this caused me to get overwhelmed and killed on the very first map. In hindsight, yeah, it's absolutely my fault I lost, but it still felt frustrating because I probably could have pulled it off had I not had the pressure of a time limit goading me into unsafe aggressive play. As a quick side note, the game has a custom run mode that allows you to, well, customize many aspects of a run, up to and including removing time limits, apparently. I haven't tried it out since I wanted to get this video out eventually, but it is an option, though I can't say how much using this mode impacts gameplay or other things, so keep that in mind. Another thing is, the map variety feels kinda lacking. To be honest, it sort of does and doesn't feel that way. Now obviously I have no way of knowing how lacking it actually is or isn't, this could very well be because of how the map is generated or something, but across my 3 successful runs I had a fair few repeats. Heck, I think I got this Ordinator of the Maison map in all 3 of those runs. At the same time, there seems to be at least 3 possibilities for the starting map, and skirmishes seem to have more diversity than battles, but again, I can't really say anything for certain. What I can say for certain is that you shouldn't be too surprised if you ever encounter a map you've already played before, perhaps in your very last game even. It won't be exactly the same, the enemies and loot will change, but other things like the layout of the map and location of chests and other elements will remain identical. The game is also kinda buggy sometimes, like occasionally the UI would just disappear, and I found myself randomly clicking on things just to get it to show itself again. Fortunately, this didn't really have any effects on gameplay whatsoever, but my skills not working did. A few times I tried to use the pull skill, which pulls a chosen ally closer to whoever's doing the pulling, and it just straight up didn't work. I think this is because the game tried to pull the unit to an already occupied space, and I guess when that happens, the game just goes, well, I can do that, guess that guy just wasted his turn, without bothering to check whether or not there actually was another space it could try. Which is kind of a bitch move on the game's part, to be honest. And my last issue is the length of runs. Being a strategy RPG, it is obviously pretty time-consuming to play, so much so that a successful run can potentially take over 10 hours to complete, even for someone like me who admittedly plays these games kind of fast. This didn't really bother me, but if you're the type of person who like roguelikes because they're the kind of games you can just hop on and get a run done in a short time, yeah, you aren't going to do that here unless you die right at the beginning. Still, aside from the time limits, most of these problems are either extremely inconsequential to the gameplay experience, or just things you should have expected going in considering the kind of game it is. And even then, time limits have become rather commonplace in roguelikes recently, so it shouldn't be that big of a surprise to see them here. So I still consider this game to be really good. I think it mixes the strategy RPG and roguelike genres well to create a unique experience with plenty of unique and interesting stuff to try, all with solid mechanics. I quite like the soundtrack, the visuals are good and charming, and the story, albeit simple, is interesting and well written. As a fan of both SRPGs and roguelikes, I really wanted a game like this, and this one was more than good enough to satisfy my hopes and desires for this kind of game. And I still have yet to try out a lot of stuff this game has to offer, so honestly I really want to come back to it at some point to give all the heroes an honest shot, experiment with builds and items, and uncover more of the story, maybe even try this custom run mode. Suffice it to say, I enjoyed my time with Astral Throne. It may be a little unorthodox, but it's got more than enough quality to go around, and I think it's definitely worth a look. Man, I'm tired and no one makes it to this point of the video anyway, so I'm just gonna get it over with. So thanks for watching, like, comment and subscribe and all that other stuff, and I'll see you in the next video maybe. Okay, bye.